Chucky wanna play?
Look at me, Damien. It's all for you.
I am the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's work.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're here.
Welcome everyone to the second to last episode of this season for the Gruesome Task podcast. My name is Deonte, and as always, I'm here with my co-host
Jose. It's really great to be here. Let's second to last episode. I'm really excited.
Yes, winding down. We want to thank everyone for watching this season and all the support that we've gotten. We have a lot of great things coming for season 2, as well as what we're going to be doing in between seasons. Before we get to that, you can always find us on our socials on Instagram at Gruesome Task Podcast, on Twitter at The Gruesome Task. You can find myself on Twitter at _under_the-knife, as well as on Instagram at xdeontems.
Yeah, and you can find me on Instagram at j.a.gallegos and on Twitter at spiritedjose. Always open to discuss anything you want on those socials, especially horror movies.
Yep, and to go ahead and mention, today we are doing the movie Bones, which released in 2001, most notably stars Snoop Dogg. If you want to watch the movie, you can watch it on the service Tubi. However, it does have some advertisements throughout watching. I know Jose mentioned to me before, you can actually own it digitally through Apple TV for about $6. If you want to be a physical collector like we are, you can purchase the Blu-ray for $24.99 shipped from Amazon. That was put out through Screen Factory, and then the DVD version is $7.69 currently.
Yeah, Tubi was very, very helpful. It does have the ads and everything, so it takes a little bit longer to watch this movie, but they have quite a bit of stuff on there. I was looking through all the different movies. They have over 2,000 different TV shows and movies, I think it said.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. I had never personally looked through Tubi, but I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. I think they just added like a whole bunch of different Halloween ones and stuff.
Okay, nice. Thank you for bringing that up and letting me know. Before we jump into the movie, if you want to go ahead and talk about what you usually do, talk about the cast, any kind of fun facts, I guess, specifically with the cast members.
Yeah, of course. So I definitely have those details here. We got Bones, released on October 24th of 2001. The runtime for this movie is 1 hour and 36 minutes. It was written by Adam Simone and Tim Metcalf, directed by Ernest R. Dickerson. The producers include Robert Harvey, Peter Heller, and Lloyd Segan, I believe. Our budget came in at $16 million, but the gross actually only came in at $8,378,853, which I thought is very interesting. But when you consider the time that this movie came out, and we'll get to this after I finish the cast, but that's kind of why it didn't make enough money back. Our cast includes Snoop Dogg as Jimmy Bones, Pam Grier plays Pearl, Michael T. Weiss plays Lupovich, Clifton Powell plays Jeremiah, Ricky Harris plays Eddie Mack, Bianca Lawson plays Cynthia, Khalil Kane plays Patrick, Merwin Mondesir plays Bill, Sean Amsing plays Maurice, Catherine Isabel as Tia, and Ron Selmore plays Shotgun.
All right, yes, a nice hearty cast there. One of the kind of interesting things to point out while we're mentioning the cast is that in the movie, the gentleman who is Patrick Pete, Khalil Kane, the young lady that plays the stepmom of his in the movie, he's actually older than in real life, which is, looking back, is really odd, because now it makes me just think, like, you're she's the mom, but you're older. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's definitely very funny. And when you compare that Snoop Dogg and his character's relationship with Pam Grier, who plays Pearl, Snoop Dogg's actually 22 younger than she is, 22 years younger than she is. So there's another age difference right there.
Yeah, it just makes you think really about how, I guess, good a lot of these actors were that were older at the time. They definitely did not look their age.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that has to do a lot with the makeup as well.
Maybe not. I see. I'm here trying to give them props. I'm letting them know that their skincare routine is looking good.
Hey man, well, you got to give props to the makeup artists and the people behind the scenes as well.
I mean, I definitely will when we talk about some of the characters that pop up in the movie, or I guess creatures, if you will. But I'm giving the actors some props now.
Okay, I'll give them some props. They look young for their age for sure. But I did want to talk about that budget difference in the gross as well. So this movie came out October 24th of 2001, which is only about a month and a half later after the attacks in the World Trade Centers, which is 9/11. So a lot of people were saying that it was easy to blame those minimal earnings on people reacting after the tragedy that happened on that day. But when you compare it to other movies that were released on that same day, one of them including 13 Ghosts, all those did fairly well. 13 Ghosts actually pulled in 15 million, making a profit off of their budget compared to this Snoop Dogg movie. And a lot of people were, combating that, oh, it's easy to blame on 9/11, but well, what happened? Why is Snoop Dogg, pulling in these fans? Why is it not marketed as a good movie?
Interesting. I didn't know that about the release date. Looking back at it now, I think maybe a lot of that does also come down to the fact that Snoop Dogg, up until this point, has been, he's been seen as he's this hip hop artist, this rapper, and he's probably would be more fit for these type of, stereotypical, maybe like gang films, something along those lines. So I wouldn't be surprised if when you see him on the front of a horror movie poster, even though it is influenced by a lot of that 70s blaxploitation stuff, a lot of people probably didn't take it seriously. And so when you have 13 Ghosts, which was trying to be serious compared to this, people may say, I'm gonna go with 13 Ghosts. And I think the other actors that were involved in 13 Ghosts were also just bigger actors at the time too.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, I'd never, try to discredit an actor even if they came from, the music industry, especially like Ice Cube made it very, very far doing serious roles. Of course, most of them being gang affiliated, hood related. But I mean, Snoop Dogg did pretty good in this film, in my opinion. I think he did his role correctly, and he really put a lot of effort into playing this. But I don't see him being out of his comfort zone very much when you really look at it.
Oh yeah, I don't think he was out of his comfort zone. I think he was fantastic in this film. I'd probably argue that he was my favorite in the film, actor wise. And I think a lot of it just comes down to what other people perceived. Because I mean, let's think about it in modern day, for example. I'm sure he's done serious films, but let's take a guy like I don't know, like a Will Ferrell, for example. Will Ferrell is predominantly in comedic roles. He's very funny. If you had him play, I don't know, like a rom-com or some type of serious thriller drama type movie, most people would be like, really? Why did you star him? Why did you not star XYZ? And they may not go see it because they don't think that he could fulfill that role properly. So I just think people probably saw that in Snoop Dogg, even though I'm like you. I think anyone could, if they want to try a role and they kill it, then they kill it. So
yeah, it's just, I don't know. I read up different reviews, and a lot of them were bashing him for his acting and so forth, saying that he can't act in general, which I don't agree with. Um, but but a lot of them were very biased. Like, they don't like the fact that this was a rap influenced or black exploitation influenced, horror movie. A lot of racism shows in these reviews for sure. Um, but I mean, it's just all over the place. I think it was good. I think a movie was definitely Snoop Dogg's crown jewel, if you could say. I think this was a hidden gem.
Oh yeah, it's really really good. And since we're talking about it, let's jump into the movie, man.
Yeah, of course. If you want to get it started.
Sure. So in the beginning of the movie, we get a man who's being chased by this kind of wolf or dog-like creature, and it has these red, beady eyes, so you can assume that it's demonic or possessed. And he ends up running into his apartment building, and he's grabs his gun. He looks out the window and he sees the wolf down there again with those red beating eyes, and he ends up shooting the dog. And that's pretty much how this movie starts. You don't, at least as far as I remember, you don't get any details of like who this guy is, where he was coming from, or what his name was, anything.
Yeah, and when he shoots the dog kind of heals itself. It's like invincible in a way, and it's still got those red eyes, and he's just staring down at the dog. And then it cuts over to these two guys in a car, and they're looking for these drug dealers, and they're calling them, looking around, seeing where they're at. And they get scared after they hear the gunshots coming across the neighborhood there. So they call these guys, and they get off the car, and they exchange the money, but the dealers don't have the drugs on them, and they have them hidden in a building just around the block.
Yeah, because they say like, well, how do we know that you're not the feds, basically? So these two guys, which they were in a predominantly like black neighborhood, and these were some white guys, and they ended up going, they grabbed the drugs, and they were cool, and it ended up being, it was crack. And then what ends up happening is some police end up pulling up on them, and so obviously they were found out, so they end up running, and they say like, well, let's hide in here. So they go into this building, and then when one of the cops gets out of the car, he's gonna run in there, and the other cop says like, no, like you don't want to go in there. It's like it's fine. And he's like, no, let's go. So they go in there, and the one guy's in the lead, and the second guy that told him not to go in there says like, come on, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. And that's when we end up getting those two white guys, and they end up getting where it was was it the wolf that jumps out at him, or was it like a shadow? I'm not too sure. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's the wolf at first, and he takes a bite out of one of the guys.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, he takes, because they were, yeah, I remember, because he takes a bite at him, so they're running. They end up kind of falling, and they tumble outside. And then I thought it was like dumb, because they, like, you just got bitten, but yet they're laughing like ha 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 and everything. And we get that the guy from the very beginning who's in the window, and he's still there with his shotgun, and he tells them, he's like, you guys need to like leave out of here, like get out of here right now. And there's guys, they're just like still there laughing. And then that's when that comes back to get him, and it pulls both of those guys back into the house and kills them, and you could see the blood squirting. You get like this shadowy kind of demon figure. It was a pretty cool scene. Although I will say, in this movie, one of the things, the blood does look very, very fake, and I think that's one part where they could have improved on, because in movies 5-10 years prior to this, I feel like they did a better job with the blood.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the blood thing, but the actual killing for me was satisfying. The movie jumps and really tries to scare you from the get-go, and in my opinion, that's like more of a serious tone when a horror film does that. And the way that it happened is one of the guys is lying on the floor, and the other one is kind of like standing up, looking over him in the doorway, and he gets pulled back, and then blood just like splurts out on the guy lying on the floor, and that guy just starts screaming instead of like trying to run or anything, and then he gets like pulled, and you get that nail kind of digging into the ground as he's getting pulled inside. So I think that was pretty good. I liked and enjoyed those killings.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And it was nice because, even though this movie is inspired by blaxploitation, they went with a serious kill in the beginning instead of a goofy one, which is always a great change of pace.
Yeah, for sure. And in most of those blaxploitations that we've seen so far, it takes some time for it to pick up as far as like the killings and the horror aspect of it. So it was inspired by it, but I like the direction that it went for a 2001 film.
Definitely. And that's when the next scene we get is they're doing kind of the opening credits and everything. And we end up seeing Snoop Dogg, who at this point we don't know his name yet. And he's just kind of there walking in his neighborhood. We see kind of from his perspective, he seems like this higher figure, if you will, a man of his community. And hip hop music and everything is playing in the background. And I thought this was a cool scene because shortly after this, it cuts to different images, different scenes just kind of flashing all across your TV screen. And it changes from that hip hop music to horror-esque music. And that was really nice. I like the way they did that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it if you really like pay attention, I know it's just like opening credits over these scenes, but if you really pay attention to it, especially after watching the movie for the first time, I went back and looked at this. It really tells the story of what happened to Snoop Dogg's character during that time. He was that higher figure, taking care of his people in the neighborhood, and then you see these guys waiting outside his house, and then Snoop Dogg is waiting outside that house, and then he kind of disappears, and then it turns into that horror-esque vibe. And the neighborhood really goes downhill from there. People start doing drugs, and you don't see people and kids like running down the street like you did earlier in the beginning of that opening sequence. So I thought that was really good if you really like focus on that and really try to pay attention to that story part of it. It was really good in my opinion.
Oh, it was nice. See, I didn't catch that portion of it. Like I caught that was my fault for not paying attention to the second part when the scene, not Charlie Sheen, when the scene shifted. I got everything in the beginning with him with the people, but once it changed, that was a good catch.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, you see people like doing drugs, you see the kids like disappear as well. You see that house that was once like this center of attention now become boarded up, and it says like keep out, and there's like people doing drugs outside of it. So yeah, it's really good if you pay attention to it.
Nice. Okay. Perfect. And after that, we end up it ends up jumping to basically kind of the real deal Holyfield beginning of the movie, where we get a gentleman who we later find out is our man Patrick, and he's there with his friend Maurice, his brother Bill, and his sister Tia, and he's basically telling them about how he ended up purchasing this property and how he's going to fix it up, and he imagines this really nice club, and it's kind of to go off of that one scene when from when those two drug dealers or the guys trying to buy the drugs ended up getting killed by the wolf. When they're walking up to this building, the friends are very hesitant. They're like, "What are you doing buying this? Like what's wrong with you?" And we get the last guy that walks in, which I believe was Maurice. He looks down, and you see the blood on the front porch from where the guy was trying to like kind of dig his nails into the thing as he's being pulled away by the wolf. So that was still fresh there.
Yeah, it was fresh everywhere. They go inside and look a little further, and you see this like half of a jaw with teeth still attached to it, and they just kind of kick it over, saying like, "Oh, is that a cat? Is that a dog. They're wondering what it is, and they just really don't want to believe that it's a human. So they look around even more, and there's a few minutes around where they're just like that creepy vibe, and they're like scaring each other. A lot of jump scares here, but they're really just scaring each other. Until you get to Tia, and she has this burger, and she goes through this door. She thinks she hears one of the guys like trying to scare her on the other side of the door, but she opens it, and there's that dog, and the dog is very angry, very vicious, but she gives it the hamburger and just like befriends it. And then she comes down, she's like, I found this dog, telling everybody, and she calls it Bones. After Maurice tells a story of the Jimmy Bones guy, and this is where we get the introduction of Snoop Dogg's character. And he remembers this old like rap, and then we get Patrick, and he kind of has this flashback of a Jimmy Bones that he once knew, and it's kind of like a buried memory that he's now remembering. So yeah, it just kind of jumps all over right here. A lot of introduction to the place, to Jimmy Bones, who that character is, how these kids are affiliated with that in some way.
Yeah, and I thought it was cool because they did like a little bit of foreshadowing, because like when he's mentioning the rap, he only remembers the first part of it where he says like Jimmy Bones, and then I think he says like has a switch, and he like can't remember all of it, so he kind of stops himself, and that'll play later on, and we'll mention it. But once they're there and they have the dog, they end up deciding to walk outside, and that's when the man is still up in that window with that gun. He's still in that same exact position, and he tells them, he's like, you better shoot that dog, like you better kill that dog. And they're all like, what are you talking about, man, like you crazy, and all this stuff. And they're like, ain't nobody gonna kill this dog. And they open up the van, and Tia goes inside, and they're about to put the dog inside as well, when we get the introduction to Cynthia as well as Pearl. And Pearl kind of grabs at the dog, and she's saying like get rid of that dog, like kill that dog, and says like it'll always be hungry, or it'll continue to get hungry. And Maurice ends up mentioning, he's like, man, y'all people around here really don't like dogs, huh? And it's just like they're so oblivious to this kind of weird activity that's going on, and why they are so scared of this dog.
Yeah, I think if 2 people or 3 people told me not to be around that dog, I would think there's something wrong with this dog, and I wouldn't let it in my car and name it, So yeah, they are oblivious, and they just don't care what these people have to say. So then you get Maurice and Patrick, and they kind of notice Cynthia there, and she's around their age, and she's very attractive. So they go and they try to flirt with her, and they tell of how they just bought this place, they're going to turn it into a club. And then Pearl comes back, and she's like, this neighborhood really isn't a place for all that, especially that house. You guys have got to get out of that house. Don't even bother. There's some weird things going around there. And it seems like she knows a lot more than what she's really, trying to tell. She's really just at the surface with it. Like, don't even bother with this house. I know a lot more. Just trust me. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in like other films, not necessarily horror, but like people know these things, but they just don't want to tell. And then this whole sequence of bad events happens. Like, you could have just prevented it if you told some truth to it,
Yeah, and one of the things that Pearl mentions is she looks at Patrick, and she says like, you look familiar, have you ever lived here before? And Patrick lets her know, well, I was born here, but I moved out when I was a little kid. And he mentions to where he moved to, and she ends up saying like, you're a little bit too dark to be living around, like you seem a little too dark to be living around there. And so it kind of, at that point, you as a viewer, you already know like, okay, he bought this like really rundown place in essentially the projects, and he lives somewhere where it's probably like a uppity like white neighborhood kind of thing. And who knows? Maybe that kind of plays into, I doubt, maybe it's just me thinking that I feel like a lot of times people that live in these kind of uppity neighborhoods are a little oblivious to things that are strange, or they just don't recognize things. So maybe that's why, since all of them live in that kind of uppity neighborhood, when they're saying like, "Oh, don't be near that dog," they're just like, "What are you talking about? It's a dog. It's a doggo. What are you talking about?"
When you really think about it, these people from these great neighborhoods, with money and be able to buy, these buildings in the lesser parts of the city, they really don't care. They think they can come in and try to save the neighborhood and fix things up with their money and so forth. So that's exactly what's going on here with Patrick. Even though he is a person of color, he still doesn't necessarily know what's going on in that neighborhood and all the bad things that are, to come with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so then the next thing we end up getting is, um, it jumps to a pool hall kind of place, and that's where we meet Eddie Mack, and he's there and he's shooting pool with his lady who he calls Snowflake in the movie. And the two guys from earlier that were the black guys, a part of the drug deal that were selling the drugs, come in, and they're basically saying like, "Oh, we got something for you," and all this stuff. And he says like, you stole that their vehicle. And they're just like, "Yeah." And he's like, "With all that commotion, we heard all that screaming and stuff." He's like, you don't be doing that. Like, if anyone's gonna start commotion, like, it's gonna be me." And he's just kind of what is the term, like, condemning them for what they did. And that's where you kind of learn, okay, so Eddie Mack is this head honcho there in the projects, who is basically a top crack dealer, and he has his henchmen under him that are actually doing the dirty work for him.
Yeah, exactly. And he mentions that he pays off the cops, and then these drug dealers actually stole those white guys' car, and that Eddie had heard, like whispers in the neighborhood that these two guys were screaming and got killed by that old house. And he assumes that, these two dealers of his were the ones to kill him. And they were like, "No, we didn't kill him. We don't know what happened to them, but we stole the car." And then Eddie comes back. He's like, "You guys are causing me a lot of trouble. Even though I pay off the cops, you guys are causing too much trouble, and you shouldn't be killing nobody like that. We're just trying to scam." Um, so then you cut over, and it's Patrick and all his friends, Tia, Bill, at their parents' house, and you get the introduction of their dad and their mom. And Tia mentions that she named the dog Bones, and you get the dad just kind of looking off in the distance, remembering kind of that name, and he has some kind of connection to Jimmy Bones. And then it cuts. I believe that's a flashback, right? There goes a flashback there.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a flashback. I don't think it was like a long, super in-depth one, but it was more so something
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
Of it here, but I was just trying to remember if it was a flashback here or if it was a little bit later. But I think it is here, and he's like leaning into Jimmy's car, and he's telling Jimmy of like this new product, and he's got this like white man behind him waiting on the corner, and he's like, "You got to come meet with this guy. He's got something new for you. It could really benefit this neighborhood, and then we can make enough money to get out of here." And Jimmy comes back, and he's like, "No, I don't want to get out of here. I want to be with my people. I want to be in this neighborhood." And then he's like, he says something about status and quo, right? I believe at the end, he's like, "Yeah, it's all about status and quo." And then Jimmy drives off in his car, and Jeremiah is like looking at it. He's like, "Well, I got the quo, but none of that status." So he doesn't feel like he's on that same level of hierarchy as Jimmy, and it feels like something bad's about to happen.
Yep, and that plays later on into the movie as well. And when the next part that we end up getting is, it cuts right back over to the pool hall, where we get the introduction of Lupovich, and he basically comes and he's talking with Eddie Mack at the pool hall, and he tells him, "Hey, well, there's like a little bit in between where we find out that Lupovich is a part of the police system or whatever, and Eddie Mack gives him some money, and uh, that's where it plays hand in hand with how you said he's paying off the cops. And Lubavitch says, "Oh, I heard someone bought that property over there, the house." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, it's someone ended up selling it." And that's when Eddie Mack is kind of looks very concerned, and Lubavitch decides that he's gonna have to try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so then it cuts over to Jeremiah, Patrick, and Bill, and they're sitting around the table, and Bill's watching TV, and the news comes on, and a story about how those two white guys had been killed in that building just surfaced, and Bill kind of like freaks out, and he almost mentions that they bought the house, but Patrick intervenes because he doesn't want his dad to know. And that was mentioned earlier when they were discussing how he bought the place, and Bill was like, "Does Dad know?" And Patrick was like, "What do you mean? No, of course not." And so then it comes back here, and Jeremiah hears this story, and he's kind of wondering what's going on. But then he goes on to tell of his experience of that neighborhood because he was from there, and he's like, "That place is bad. You should never go there. We should focus on ourselves now. We made our way to a better place. This is going to be a better place." But then the doorbell rings, and it's Lubavitch paying a visit to Jeremiah, and he's asking why Jeremiah sold the building. Jeremiah knows nothing of any, selling any building. So we get the sense that Jeremiah owns the building. It was sold without his permission. And Lubavitch is kind of threatening Jeremiah, saying, I think at one point he's like, "It's easier to cover up a secret that 4 people know if 3 of them are, gone." Something like that. And just kind of paraphrasing there. But yeah, I do. So there's something fishy going on here. Jeremiah is in on it. Lubavitch knows of it. I'm sure Eddie Mack knows of it at this point. And yeah, we just get all this kind of collusion going on.
Yeah, and he one of the things Lubavitch ends up saying is, he says, "Well, they better not find out what happened 20 years ago." And so now, this movie does a good job of kind of doing that over every scene, where they just kind of plant another little piece of the story together. So at this point, it's like, okay, we can kind of guess that there's something going on with this Jimmy Bones character, and Jeremiah, the father, is in cahoots with Lubavitch and Eddie Mack in some way with this house and whatever's going on there. And so it does a really, really good job. And shortly after that, that's when we end up getting the what's her name? Cynthia ends up actually coming by. She's kind of, we find out that she ends up being attractive to Patrick, because before she pulls up on the house, she is kind of seen like off into the distance, I guess, kind of planning her to act like, "Oh, I'm just walking through the neighborhood," when she really went there to go see him. And so she comes up, and he's like kind of all up on her, talking to her, which I also find kind of crazy because this is only their second interaction, and he was like way, way up on her. If I was her, I would have been like, "Whoa, bro, 6 feet," you know what I'm saying? Corona. So then she mentions like, "My mom doesn't want me over here. My mom said to stay away from this house, to stay away from that dog, and stay away from all of you." And he says, "Well, do you believe her?" And she says, "Well, if I believed her, I wouldn't be within 50 yards of this place." And she ends up mentioning how her mom ends up saying that every house has 2 houses, every street has 2 streets. Kind of, I guess, hinting that there's two sides, or two sides to every story, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, that's what I took from it as well. But after that, you get Bill lying in a bed in that house after they had fixed up that room. And he's just listening to music with his eyes closed, just kind of relaxing. And then we get this shot of the wall, I guess, to the right of him. And it turns into this like wall of people, and they're like stuck into the wall. They've got this like black goo all over them, and their arms are like coming out of the wall. And eventually they just start like detaching from the wall, and they surround Bill, while he's lying there, he still has no idea because he can't hear anything with the headphones on and his eyes are closed. And then he opens them and like the things go away instantly. And he gets spooked because he feels that presence, the spirits around him and stuff. And then he looks and kind of relaxes. He looks into the ceiling and he sees Jimmy's face up into the ceiling. He gets really scared, so he runs out the room. He runs into Patrick there, and Patrick's just kind of like trying to calm him down because he looks really, really spooked.
Yeah, that was a really cool scene, and with all the black goo, like I was wondering what's with all the black goo? Why are they like that? So that was really cool. And right when you get the Snoop, I keep wanting to call him just Snoop Dogg because I know him as Snoop Dogg. Right when you get Bones, and he does the thing on the ceiling, and that's when he runs to the door, and Patrick is there, and Patrick's like, are you all right? Were you scared? And he was like, yeah, a little. And he's like, oh, it's okay, man. Like, there's some, this place gives me the creeps too a little bit. And that right afterwards, the scene then cuts to the mom of Cynthia. What's that girl's name? Pearl. And she goes into Cynthia's room, and we can see Cynthia is painting, and she has a lot of paintings and drawings all around her room. And the mom says like, oh, are you going to be joining me tonight? And she's like, no, Mom, like, I'm not going to. And the mom says like, well, you have the gift like I have. I don't want you to waste it on this painting. And Cynthia ends up saying like, well, I don't want to waste my gift like you wasted yours. And it's kind of like a little, not confrontation, but just like a little moment between them, so you can kind of get there's this I guess disconnect with both Cynthia and her mom.
Yeah, for sure. And it feels that feeling goes throughout the movie because like Cynthia's doing stuff behind her mom's back, even though Pearl's trying to protect her and all these different things. And then she specifically during the scene says like, I really don't want you going over to that house. I feel like something really bad is going to happen there, especially with those kids being there. And I don't want you getting tied up into that. And then it cuts to Pearl in another room, and she has this picture of her and Jimmy Bones, and they were a couple, and he was like looking at her in that picture, but then she sees him like, turn in that picture and look straight at her. And she drops the picture, and she's very spooked. There's a lot of suspense in this, and she goes very slowly to pick up that picture, and he's still moved. He's still looking at her, and she's all spooked. I thought that was a pretty good, and it was very like early 2000s, kind of horror, that it was good. I definitely liked that.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool scene as well. And it was also a little, I guess, kind of interesting how it, based off that picture, that there was some type of relationship of Bones and Pearl being together, but yet when he glared at her in the picture, he looked angry, like very mad.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And it goes even further, like how you were saying, these little pieces are piecing the story ever so often, because we had no idea that Jimmy and her had a thing, other than like the opening credits. Like you kind of saw them, but he just looked like he was hitting on some random woman at like the grocery store. But now you get more of the sense that they were actually a couple when he was, I guess alive, because we have no idea what Jimmy is at this point.
100%. And then the next thing we end up getting after that is where the Cynthia, again, like you mentioned, she doesn't listen to her mom. She goes behind her back. She ends up showing up to the house, so that way she can help them clean up and set up for this nightclub that they're trying to build. And it's like as she's walking in, you hear these kind of voices in the background. They're pretty faint, but enough to where you can hear them. And then that's when Patrick pops up out of nowhere and kind of shakes off whatever bad, juju or whatever the building was giving off at that time. And she's like, oh, I'm here to help you guys clean. I thought you would need the help. and a scene cuts right again, a lot of scene cuts to this fresh blood that's on the floor, and all the group of kids as well as Cynthia's there, and they say like, oh well, maybe it's like a leaking pipe, and then they felt the floor and they said, oh, it feels like it's a heartbeat, like it's pumping. And so they all go downstairs and they see this giant pipe that has more blood that's just dripping. And then Maurice, being like dumb like he is, he was like, "Oh, that's just rust. That's just rust." And I'm thinking like, boy, when does rust look like blood? Like, come on, man. And
Yeah.
that's when they go ahead and they spot that door and they go inside, and it leads into like this weird kind of tunnel like cave looking area.
Yeah, and that door was locked, and the dog was trying to get inside of it. So they bust it open. They go down. There's like this tunnel going deep, deep down under the house, and they just kind of stay there. They're looking around. There's really not much going on, and then the dog starts digging in the middle, and he digs up the bones of Jimmy Bones, and they kind of identify it because Maurice goes back to that one rap song that he was rapping, and he remembers like the rest of it, and he mentions a switchblade and a ring, and both of those were still there on the bones of Jimmy. And they're all just kind of freaking out at this point. They don't know what to do, who to call, if they should call the police, and they all just ultimately decide to kind of keep it quiet until after the weekend because they don't want to slow the process of them opening that nightclub. Cynthia just kind of goes off. She kind of sees like this shadow or ghost of Jimmy, and as she gets closer, we make out the facial features of Jimmy, and then Patrick goes over and just kind of says, "Oh, we have to go," and then it disappears, and they go back to upstairs. But Maurice is kind of the last one. He turns around and he pulls the ring off of Jimmy's bones, and he keeps it for himself.
Yeah, he says like, you won't be needing this, and he grabs it, but his whole finger comes off, and then he's like, you won't be needing this either, and then he shakes off his finger. Then the next little kind of, it was a quick scene because we get Patrick and Cynthia up in one of the bedrooms, but right before it cuts to them, they end up feeding the dog just like some raw meat, and as the dog is eating the raw meat, the camera keeps cutting back to that skeleton of Jimmy Bones, and you can see where it looks as if it's like life is being pumped into him. There's some type of like blood starts circulating. You see like veins start kind of forming over the skeleton a little bit, and it just happened. And it's just like real brief, and then it cuts right back to them in the bedroom, and Cynthia is saying how like, you know, she wants to stay the night there, and all this kind of stuff, and they start getting a little frisky with each other, and so they start making out, and as they're making out, the camera view is like a top-down view where Cynthia's on bottom, Patrick's on top, and you can see Cynthia's eyes, and you kind of see this presence of a shadow go over them kind of briefly, and Cynthia freaks out, and she's like, oh no, like, and Patrick's like, oh, I'm sorry, like, you know, are you okay and stuff, and she's like, no, he's like, you can go, I understand. She's like, no, I want to stay, but you know, and he's like, it's cool, I'll go sleep with the guys, like, you take this bed for yourself.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good showing his character and, you know, winning us on his side. He isn't this horrible guy who's going to try to force himself after, you know, she says no, and then it cuts to Pearl, and she's got this group going on, and looks like they're trying to talk to spirits. They do the hand holding around a table, and she's like trying to talk to them out loud, and then it cuts. This is the part where it cuts like from Pearl's thing going on with those people, and then it cuts over to Cynthia, and she's asleep in that bed, and so we get what looks like Patrick come into the room where Cynthia's sleeping, and it definitely looks like him. You get the outline of him, but it's very dark. You really can't see for sure if it's really his face, but you kind of make out that figure. And he goes and lies down with Cynthia and just kind of like spoons her for a bit, and then it cuts over to Pearl again, She notices and she kind of feels a presence of a spirit around them. And then it cuts back to Cynthia, and it looks like Patrick's, trying to touch her a bit more under the sheets, and she's kind of like pushing him off, trying to get him to stop. And then it cuts over to Pearl again, and it feels like there's a message that is trying to receive, and she's asking around like, is it for this person, is it for this person, until it comes around back to her. And she has this like way of communicating where if it's a yes, knock once, I believe, or it could be the other way around. If it's yes, knock once, if it's no, knock twice. And when it gets to her, it knocks and it lets her know it has a message for her. Then it cuts back to Cynthia and Patrick, and Patrick seems to be getting more intense, and Cynthia is getting very upset, and she keeps telling no, 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 until we get the overhead shot of them in the bed, and there's nobody lying next to her, and the sheets like wrap around her and try to start suffocating her. Which I think that, this back and forth really builds the suspense of it, where it brings you in. And then once you get that sheet and see that it's not really Patrick, that's where you're like, oh, what's really going on here?
Oh yeah, and it was pretty crazy, and how the scene was cutting back and forth between them trying to talk to the spirits, and Cynthia was real cool. And we get where the mom, she ends up having kind of like a vision, if you will, because it wasn't really a flashback, but more so seeing potentially of what could happen in the future. She was seeing Cynthia in that bed and laying there while the bed was oozing blood coming up, and we can see where it showed like the outline of, or kind of figure of bones, and where there was like fire coming up. It was like a whole thing. And so immediately then it jumps to where Cynthia wakes up, and she's like breathing real heavy, and she's looking around all crazy, and Patrick comes in like, are you okay, what's going on? And she starts putting on her clothes, and he's like, I think I hear your mom outside. So Pam, she came running over there, and she's, Cynthia, get out of the house and stuff. And Cynthia comes out in the front door, and Pam tells all of them like, hey, if y'all stay in this house one more night, like all of y'all are going to die. Like you need to get out of here now. So it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, definitely. The blood, of course, definitely looks fake, but I think that scene with Cynthia, like drowning into the bed, and the water rises as she like just goes underneath. I think that was a pretty good scene. It very, very scary, yes, and it kind of makes you think like, is Cynthia gonna die next? Is she really gonna die right here? What's going on? And then Pearl's like having these crazy visions. It was really good. I really enjoyed that scene altogether. But anyways, they leave. And then it cuts over, and Patrick is taking his dad on this little thing. He wants to show him something, and he ends up showing him the house that he bought, telling him it's going to be a nightclub. And immediately his dad kind of freaks out, and he starts yelling and saying, you need to sell this. We're going to get you your money back. This needs to be non-existent. You need to forget about this. And I forbid it. And while Patrick is like trying to make his case, he's coming back at his dad saying like, no, I did this all by myself. I just want kind of, asking him to be proud of him in a way. But of course, Jeremiah has, this deep secret, relating to this house, and he isn't telling Patrick what's really going on. He just kind of Patrick feels like his dad's just being unsupportive. And Jeremiah kind of looks around, and Pearl's walking down the street, and then he sees that guy in the window again, and he kind of recognizes both of them. And then we get this big major flashback, which I thought is, it's a good way to tell the rest of this story that we've been wondering for so long, and all these pieces coming together. But anyways, we get Jimmy. He finally gets to this house where this meeting is being held, and he meets up with Jeremiah, Eddie, and Lupovich. And he has this bodyguard that we kind of get the sense of that presence every time we get the flashback, but we don't really get an introduction to this bodyguard. and this bodyguard is actually the same guy that's been in that window with the gun, and they call him Shotgun.
Yeah, and in this meeting, what ends up happening is that we get it where the Jeremiah and Jimmy are fairly good friends, and Jeremiah is bringing over Eddie Mack and Lupovic to show him of this new stuff that they want to try and bring to the streets. And of course, it turns out to be crack, and immediately Jimmy's like, I'm not interested. And Eddie Mack's telling him like, just try it. And he's like, I said I'm not interested. And then they kind of go back and forth a little bit, and he's mentioning about how like he kind of compares it to lottery tickets, and he says how lottery tickets, it's like the high of winning money, and he's saying how like, you know, people are going to be basically addicted to this like they are lottery tickets. And Jimmy's like, your 12 and a half minutes is up. And we can see Eddie Mack kind of get up and get in his face, and Shotgun, the bodyguards, telling him like, hey, get back, sit down. And as they're kind of walking away, we see Bones tells him like, oh, I'm sorry, Jeremiah, like, you know, it is what it is kind of thing. And that's when Eddie Mack and Lupovic pull guns out on the bodyguard and tells him to drop his gun, and he pulls a gun out on Jimmy Bones as well. And they're saying like, you know, oh, you had to come down to this, like, you like try it. So they basically force him to smoke this crack. And Jimmy Bones he gets like this crazy like high, and we see him getting real loopy, and then he pulls out his switchblade and he slices Lupovic, and as soon as he does that, they basically shoot him.
Yeah, and at this point, they're just like shooting him multiple times, both guys, Eddie and Lupovic. And Pearl, who Jimmy's lover, walks in. She sees the whole thing going down. She starts screaming. Lupovic is like, you need to be quiet, and he puts the gun to her head. And they're trying to come up with a plan because they didn't expect to kill anybody. And Lupovic is a cop, so he's a cop even in these old days, and he just kind of realizes what needs to happen and how to get away with it, and he makes everybody stab Jimmy with his own knife, and that's kind of like a pact that he gets going, saying if one person, you know, we're all in this together, so if one person gets caught and we're all linked to this, we're gonna have everybody's fingerprints on this switchblade, and they just keep going. And I don't remember the order, but I know Eddie really had no remorse for it. He definitely goes in on his stabbing. Lupovic is the same. Jeremiah, on the other hand, he was very hesitant at first, and because Jimmy was like pleading with him, he's like, "No, man, don't do this. We were together since kids, since we were young." And Jimmy he's hesitant at first, but then he kind of realizes like, "Oh, this is what needs to be done. You said it for yourself. Every man for himself." And then it goes over to the bodyguard Shotgun. He's hesitant, and he really doesn't want to do it. He doesn't even look at Jimmy but he has a gun to his head, so he has to stab him. So he can't look Jimmy in at all while he stabs him. And then they make Pearl do it, and she's crying, she's heartbroken, but she also has a gun to her head. But at this point, Jimmy kind of leans up and kind of stabs himself to kill himself. And then Lupovic rips off the dress of Pearl, and he's like, we're going to bury this deep under the house. Nobody's going to speak of this again. But we just need to move on from this.
Yeah, and that was like a crazy scene, because now we learn everything, what we kind of suspected, while we didn't know, you know, who killed Jimmy Bones or necessarily how he died. We just knew that all of those characters were all linked up. We know why they were acting weird, why they're afraid to go in that house and everything. So it was kind of great to just compile everything together. The very next scene we end up getting is where it's the club and it's popping off. It's lively. There's the DJ, they got all these people, there's drinks, a dance floor, all this kind of stuff. And we get where Cynthia goes to the club and she's hanging out with Patrick, and we get our boy Maurice and he's there DJing. And this woman comes. She's like got curly hair. She's attractive, and she's seducing him from afar. And so he tells Bill, he's like, "Hey man, like, you handle this for a minute. Play like a longer song. I got some business to take care of." So he's following this girl, and this girl's leading him up the stairs. So he's thinking like, "Oh, I'm about to get some or whatever." And he goes into this room and he sees the girl, and then that's when, which this scene was cool, because as soon as she like smiles, her face turns evil and she turns into that wolf dog kind of thing, and she basically ate him alive.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was this dog is a shapeshifter. We haven't really mentioned it, but it's very minimal up to this point in the movie. I think at one point when it was like about to eat those two white guys from the beginning, it turned into a rat when it was running away. And then it just like, goes throughout the movie, different things. But at the beginning of this scene, when it goes down before it turns into the woman to seduce Maurice, it's the dog. And while it's coming down the stairs, it sees Maurice's, and it has the ring on Maurice's finger. And then it turns into an attractive woman because it kind of knows like what would attract Maurice. But the killing scene is very brutal. Like, there's blood splattering everywhere. The dog is really tearing into it. Maurice is yelling like crazy. But then it cuts back downstairs, and Bill is like wondering why Maurice isn't back yet. He gets Patrick to go upstairs and look for Maurice, and Patrick goes into the right room and sees the dog attacking Maurice.
Yes, and while this is all happening, the other kind of big thing as well is that it's the earlier, how when the dog or the wolf was eating that raw meat and we saw the flesh kind of pumping over the skeleton, as it's eating Maurice, we can see that it's kind of taking form now, and the skeleton's becoming more of a human body, and ultimately it's becoming Jimmy Bones. And when Patrick ends up seeing Maurice getting eaten by the dog, he's like terrified. He's like, "Oh no, like what the heck, blah blah blah." And then there's all these, like, the wolf ends up spitting maggots at Patrick, which this was where things kind of turned, because at this point, while there's some jokes and stuff thrown in, the movie took itself very seriously. And I felt with the whole maggots, that's where it got silly. And I know we'll get into this when we get into ratings, but that bothered me because I wanted them to keep it serious. And so the fact that this like wolf opened its mouth and just spat all these maggots on him, and the fact that he just kind of seemed like, obviously he was freaked out with the maggots, but he just kind of took it and was sitting there in these maggots, I was like, that's not like, I understand like he's a main character, so you're not gonna have him die right here and like have him get eaten, but have more of a struggle or something where he gets away. I mean, I don't know. I didn't like that scene.
Yeah, it was. I think I agree here. From this point, the film does get very silly. It had really good, very serious horror tone for most part up until now. And before it attacked Patrick, like the face of the dog turned into Maurice's and like cracked some weird joke that like it was just very unnecessary. But the maggots thing plays into more than just Patrick. So the dog spitting out maggots at Patrick is very gross, very disturbing. But then as that's happening, Jimmy Bones is becoming this person. He awakens and you see him like stand up and stuff. But then it cuts back to the maggots and they're like falling from the ceiling now onto the people that are in the club underneath. And you see these bugs get into the cups and people are drinking them down, and then one guy ends up eating pizza with them on top of it, and he like feels something funny that's not pizza, so he looks and there's maggots, and then there's just like tons of them falling down and people are like freaking out, running out the club. and then we get people freaking out, and then we get this explosion coming from downstairs, and this is where Jimmy Bones has his persona on. He's got these black clothes. He's got a long, very very nice trench coat. He's got this hat as well, and he's just like causing fire to everything. People are running out, and at one point Cynthia and Bill are like, where's Maurice? And he's like, he's dead, but we got to get out of here.
Yeah, and when Patrick and Cynthia they're kind of the last ones to run out the door because they turn around and Patrick and Cynthia both glare at Jimmy Bones, and he pulls out his switchblade and throws it at them, but they just narrowly escape and close the door. And I thought that was great, and everyone was outside all scared and everything. And what ends up happening is we get where Pam ends up running, and she's like hugs Cynthia, and she's like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. And Jimmy Bones opens up that door, and he glances at Pam, and they both lock eyes just for a brief second. And then that's when he disappears, and we get the man from the window, who we now know is Shotgun, the bodyguard. He comes down, and he mentions to Pam, like, we should have done this a long time ago. And I think in his mind, maybe he thought burning the building, basically like made everything okay. I don't know.
Yeah, her name's actually Pearl.
Oh, I've been calling her Pam this whole time.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I caught it just now. I don't know how long you've been saying it, but I just caught it now. Anyways, so we get Shotgun coming down. He's like, yeah, he thinks the problem's gone away. But it cuts over to him in his apartment. He's like having dinner, and he's starting to hear noises. So he pulls out his gun. He's very wary of what's about to go down. He thinks someone's coming after him, but we see Jimmy Bones appear behind him, coming in from the shadows. And Shotgun just freaks out. Like, he doesn't know what to expect now. He doesn't try shooting his gun because he knows that Jimmy's gonna end up killing him regardless. So that's exactly what happens. And Shotgun just tries to make his case. He's like, I didn't want to do it, man. You don't have to kill me for this. I really didn't want to kill you. I was your guy. Like, we were in this together. But then Jimmy Bones comes back and says something like, you could have died with me. We could have gone out this together. Even though you had a gun to your head, you could have at least tried to, fight back. And instead of giving in and you stabbing me like that. So Jimmy just gets his blade and cuts the throat of Shotgun. And it's a very sad scene. There's more. It's horrific. Of course, it's got that horror music going on, but it's very sad because it didn't seem like Jimmy necessarily wanted to do this. It was just more of his like revenge because he trusted this guy, and he wanted him to fight with him to the very end, regardless of what was going down.
Yeah, and also technically, her name actually is Pam because that's her real life name.
Oh, okay, that's what I see where the confusion is now.
But yeah, so from this point going forward, Pam is now Pearl. So, anyway, right after he ends up killing Shotgun, we see him walking down the street, and he just looks so badass in his trench coat and everything, and he's just walking like ever so smooth. And we get those two thugs from the beginning that were the drug dealers and the ones that are working for Mac, and he tells him, he's like, oh, what is you shaft looking wannabe doing around these parts? Like, he's like Mac doesn't like, he's like, Eddie Mac doesn't like people coming on his turf. And then that's when Jimmy's like, oh, Eddie Mac. And the guy's kind of like, he says, I'm like, give me that coat. He says like, come up off that coat. And the other guy's like, nah, man, come on, like, it's not worth it. And he's like, no, come up off the coat. And then that's when he turns around and he just like slices him with the switchblade, and the other guy tries to pull out his gun and shoot him, but he realizes that the bullets don't affect him, and so he kills both of them. And see, it's still very serious at this point, but then it gets silly because when he kills him, you see the outlines of their blood just like shoot on the wall, like, and it's just there. And I'm just like, oh man, like, why did you have to do that? It should have just cut after he sliced him. Like, you didn't have to make it silly, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked it. I mean, I felt like it was gonna head in a more silly direction, especially after this point and after the whole maggot scene and everything. So I just kind of loosened up on the serious tone of it, and I was like, that's a pretty good idea, and that you get exact like silhouettes made out of blood of these two guys, and the kill was so forceful that the blood just splattered perfectly. So I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was really it shocked me. It definitely did. I was like, oh wow, this is crazy. But anyway, so he kills them, and then it cuts over to Patrick, and he confronts his dad in his dad's office, and he's like, what's going on? Did you set fire to my club, to my building? And his dad, of course, is like, no, I don't know what's going on. What are you talking about? And then Patrick tries to go deeper, and he's like, well, what do you know about this house? When I took you there, it seemed like you knew something was going on. Your face, you recognize it. I know you too well. You need to be honest with me and stop hiding stuff from me. And of course, Jeremiah, it just kind of stops it. Like, he doesn't really want to tell anything. And then it cuts over to Pearl. She's reading her cards, and she gets like the first two. I don't necessarily know anything about tarot cards, so I can't really tell you what those first two cards. But I know for sure the last one was death. That one's pretty obvious. And she kind of like freaks out, and then the lights go off, and the candles blow out, and we see Jimmy's hand come out from the dark, and he kind of caresses her face. And as he's doing this, Cynthia walks in, and she sees what happens, and then of course Jimmy disappears, and Pearl doesn't know how to react. She's very shocked. She doesn't really believe that Jimmy's back, but she knows now that he is, and she also knows of Jimmy's plan. I guess when he touched her, like, there was that connection, and now she knows that Jimmy's come back to kill everybody that was involved with his death, and also kill the kids that helped to bring him back to life. And Cynthia kind of realizes, well, I was a part of that. I was what helped bring him back to life. So now they're scared, and they don't know what to do from there.
Right. And at that point as well, Pearl had told Cynthia, it was either this scene or right after when they left that burning house, that Jimmy was her father. As well, because Cynthia had mentions like earlier when she's in bed with Patrick, they bring up like families, and she says, oh, well, I don't know my father, like my father's never been around. So now she knows who her father is. But after Jimmy comes and does a quick caress of her face, he ends up leaving to go visit Eddie Mack. And we get a scene where it's his typical kind of pool hall, and Eddie Mack and his lady Snowflake just ended up doing some business, and Snowflake's walking away, and she's going to the bar, and Eddie Mack's there like dancing around and saying how he's gonna like do stuff again to her and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, oh, don't keep me waiting, baby. Nobody keeps the Mac Daddy waiting. And she doesn't come, and he's like, Snowflake. And he's like, don't keep Eddie Mac waiting now. So he decides to go in, and he sees just this trail of blood, and so he starts to freak out, and he goes into the actual portion of the bar, behind the bar, and we can see Snowflake's feet just dangling out of a trash can with all this blood around it. That was a cool scene. I really like that. And so at this point, Eddie Mack, he doesn't know that it's Jimmy Bones or anything, but he goes back to the main portion of his bar pool hall area, and he has both of his guns, and he's like, all right, come out. Whoever it is, whoever wants to smoke, like, come out.
I really enjoy Eddie's character. I like how he didn't necessarily, I mean, you could see that he was scared at first, but then he like springs into action and goes straight for his guns, and he's like talking like, oh, come after me. If you're gonna come get me, then come get me. Playing that drug dealer role very, very well instead of getting scared. But it cuts over and we see Jimmy walking across this or next to this pool table, and he's got the blade dragging against the pool table. This is another little silly thing for me. It didn't really necessarily make sense, and it just kind of felt, added to up the gore factor, or what I guess. But he's dragging the blade against the pool table felt, and out comes blood while he's doing this. I didn't necessarily understand that part, but then it cuts over and Eddie's talking. He's like, he doesn't necessarily believe Jimmy is back and that he believes that he was dead, but Jimmy's like, well, I'm here. And of course, Eddie immediately just starts popping shots off, and he's like, I'll put more bullets into you, put you away for good. And of course, Jimmy doesn't die. He takes the bullets and he's invincible. Another thing that I thought was weird is Jimmy's now holding this mirror. And he's like, well, look at what you did. This kind of thing. And Eddie puts more shots into the mirror, and the mirror shatters, and Jimmy makes the shattered glass kind of float up into the air. Eddie runs away to avoid it, but Jimmy sends him on shooting, and it pins Eddie up against the wall. And he's still alive. Like, you would think that he would be dead, and all the glasses through him. It literally went from through his back out through his front. And Jimmy goes up behind him. He grabs his switchblade and he cuts off his head.
Yeah, and I thought, I don't want to like spoil something, so I'm gonna bring up, but it ties back to the pool scene with the blood. I thought that was cool, and I think there was a reason why, or it made sense why he did it. So I'll bring that up later. But this goes back to it being really silly, and I understand why he did it, but you think at this point that Eddie Mack is dead, right? But instead he's walking with his head, and his head's talking, and he's like, this is how it works. I killed you, you killed me, we're done here. And that was kind of funny. But he says that he basically kept his head because his soul is still in the head, and he was gonna, I guess, like need him or whatever. And so we then cut to the cop, Lupovic, and he gets a call from someone that sounds like Eddie, and he's Eddie Mack, and he's basically saying like, oh, like meet up at the spot. And so they go meet up at the spot, and that's when he walks in, and as soon as he goes through the door, it says like hell and blood, which I thought that was cool. And when he ends up going there, he pulls up, and it's just like piles and piles of crack, and the cop's like picking up all the bags, and he turns around, and it's just Eddie Mack's head, and he like drops it down, and when he drops it down, then appears Jimmy Bones. Jimmy Bones slices him up, and then all the blood falls on Eddie Mack, and he mentioned something like he's still talking, which at this point I'm like, oh my gosh, like why are they just not dead? But I know it's a comedy, horror, blaxploitation, whatever. And even then, at this point, like he doesn't just kill the cop, he slices his head off too and takes his head.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It really turned silly very, very quickly. Eddie's just making jokes the whole time, even though he's just a head. At one point, Jimmy like smacks him into the wall, and he's like, well, what do you got to do that for? Like, it's just the jokes really come in here, the comedy aspect of it. But the killing of Lupovic, I thought was pretty good, because Jimmy like forces him to smoke some crack first, and he like holds his mouth to keep the smoke in him, and then he like wipes away, and Lupovic's nose and mouth are just completely gone, so this smoke is in him forever. And then Jimmy picks him up and like hangs him on a hook, and then this is where he like slices his his throat and stuff, and blood like falls out. But then of course it cuts into another joke while with the blood spilling onto Eddie's head on the ground. He's like, "Well, come on, man, that was unnecessary." So I don't know, the killing and the blood parts for this, it does it for me. But then it cuts to these jokes being made, and a headless or this head just making jokes and stuff. That's where it contradicts itself for me. It's a really good movie, but I don't know, these jokes very ruin it kind of in a way.
Yeah, I see that. And we the very next part we get, he's obviously got 3 of them down. There's one more to visit, so he has to go visit the father. What was his name? Jeremiah. So he has to go visit him, and he I don't remember exactly how he appears. I just remember that he ends up popping up there. Do you remember exactly how he showed up?
Yeah, I think he just like comes from the shadows at this point. He does that quite a bit, to where he just appears out of the darkness. So I think he just shows up in the room.
Okay, so yeah, because he's in the Jeremiah's in like his office, and he basically just pops up, and he's telling him about how like, oh, I didn't want to do it, all this stuff, like we knew each other since we were kids, all that kind of sympathy type stuff. And then the scene cuts to where it's the Cynthia and Pearl, and they're running to the house, and what's that boy's name? What's the man? Their names Patrick. They for some black people, they got some white ass names. Anyway, so so then Patrick, he ends up coming out, and he's like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "You need to go like get your father. Like he's in danger." And so they run upstairs, and at this point, the father's gone, Jimmy's gone, but they glance at the window, and the window it's broken, but it doesn't look as if like a normal glass break. It looks as if it like oozed open, and there's this green kind of like aura around it. It looked pretty cool.
Yeah, it was more than just the glass shattering. It felt like Jimmy, I guess, transformed into this spirit and took all of them with him, and they just kind of like plasma through the glass. It was good. The glass was melted and everything. It's definitely different. But after that, we get Jimmy with the 2 heads and Jeremiah there back in the house, and there's that wall of people covered in like black and the arms sticking out. And the heads are playing with Jimmy like, "Oh, you don't have to do this. You don't have to take our souls away. You don't have to torture us." And they're just playing like Eddie at one point offers Jimmy all the money that he has, but I don't think Jimmy is necessarily interested in that because he's dead. And he ends up feeding both of the heads to this wall, and they really just like suck it in. It's very weird. And when he's done with the heads, he goes over to Jeremiah and kind of tortures him and like puts him up against it, like to get him sucked in, but at the same time pulls him out. And it just keeps like going. And then it cuts over to different scenes. And this is where oh yeah, they're driving to the house. It's Pearl, Cynthia, Patrick, all of them, and they're driving to the house. And Pearl is like, there's 3 aspects. There's like spirit. What were they?
What are you talking about? Like, oh, because from what I remember, they're there. And are you talking about when they realize where they're saying like,
yeah, like Pearl's like, the blood is in the house. That's why Jimmy.
Yes, yeah, essentially because the blood is still in the house, his like spirit is within that blood. So they say that they have to get rid of the blood.
Yeah, in other words, yeah, basically that. And I know she says like there's spirit mind or something like that, something in that aspect, because she like does the whole readings and the tarot cards and stuff like that. So yeah, she just realizes like, oh, we got to get rid of the blood to get rid of Jimmy's spirit, and then we'll be rid of this for good.
Yeah, so we end up getting where the group goes further into the into the tunnel. And they're looking for the dress because when they go down there, the skeleton's gone. They're like, "Where's it at? Where's it at?" And she asks, like, "Well, was she buried with? Was the skeleton buried with anything?" And they said, "Oh, it was buried with some like yellow rag or green rag." She says, "My dress. The blood is on the dress." So they're looking for that. And as they're going further down this kind of tunnel, it ends up being all these like corridors, kind of like different walls. They spot this elevator shaft-esque thing, and the mom ends up going in the elevator shaft, and the rest of them climb up, I guess, manually. And when the mom reaches the top part, that's where we get Jimmy Bones. He meets her, and he basically says like, "Oh, like something like I told you we." Oh, he like caresses her face and says like, "I told you that my hands would be around you again tonight." And then he has that dress with the blood on it, and he kind of holds it over her. It did a good job where he holds it over her, and then when he moves the dress away, she's looking how she did back in 1979. She no longer has the dreadlocks. She has an afro. She's wearing the exact same dress that she had then, all that kind of stuff. But the blood was, if I'm not mistaken, was still on the dress, however.
Yeah, but it just feels like she has like this mask, and she can only see like herself as the young. There's no blood on the dress. But while all this is going on, even before this, at that point, Jimmy had already gotten rid of Jeremiah, sent him through the wall of those people, and then after Pearl gets up to the elevator, the kids are trying to go after her, and they get up through this, and they have to go through like this plasma kind of this goo to get through into the house. And once they do, Cynthia is like, "This is the city of the dead. They've entered it, and they just kind of got to remember the old house to maneuver through it correctly and find Pearl and Jimmy and try to get rid of this whole problem." So they start going through it, and Bill sees Maurice, and he goes after Maurice, and Maurice is kind of leading them away. But it's only Bill being lured, and Cynthia kind of says like, "That doesn't look like Maurice. That's not Maurice." And they just kind of stay in the same place while Bill goes off, and then Bill gets like torn up by those arms in the wall, and he dies. And Cynthia, or what is it, Patrick, like wants to go after him, but Cynthia's like, "No, he's gone." Like they have no reaction to that death whatsoever. They just let it happen, and that's Patrick's brother, like his blood brother. And yeah, he's just gone, and they don't really care. They gotta keep moving.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird that they didn't. It's kind of like they're sacrificing Bill to complete their mission, if you will. Um, and the how she mentions like it doesn't look like Maurice. We can, at least I assume that Maurice was the shape shifter. That was probably the wolf earlier. It made it, and what made it look like the girl with the curly hair. Now it's looking like,
I mean, it could have been. It really could have been anything. They were in like the city of the dead, so it could have just
been
been
Maurice, but like a
Yeah,
evil, version of him.
yeah, like he's the ghost now, so he's got to help kill people. So I don't know. It was interesting to see that whole thing, and Bill just getting excluded from the film altogether.
Yeah, because I think that like the kill itself was cool and the way they did it was cool, but there should have been more reaction from Cynthia and Patrick. Because like you said, it was basically, he's gone, let's continue going. And then the very next scene was where they make their way up, and we see where it's Jimmy and Pearl, and they're like kind of holding each other and hugging. And when they see Cynthia, they open their arms so that way Cynthia could join them in their hug. And Patrick's kind of like, "Cynthia, like, no, what are you doing?" and all that kind of stuff. And what ends up happening is that um as they're doing that and they're having their little moment, we see Patrick and he looks over at that wall that has all the kind of the black gooey arms and stuff, and he hears his dad say, Patrick, Patrick, like, get me out of here, get me out of here. So of course he runs over and the arms are grabbing him, pulling him in, and somehow he has that switchblade, and he, or not the switchblade, the knife, and he cuts the big gooey arm off, and he looks down at the switchblade, and then he looks at Jimmy, and Jimmy kind of glances at him and gives him an evil look, but then he's turned back around and Patrick goes up behind him. We can assume he's going to stab him, but then Jimmy disappears, and when it turns around, we see Jimmy now looking more demonic. His face has that kind of death look to it, and he just kind of puts Patrick in this weird whirlwind of, like, I guess wind, basically, and he's like spinning like crazy, and Cynthia's just there, screaming, stop, 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 dad, stop, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting sequence of events here. Like, Patrick has to realize that his dad's dead. His dad almost killed him by choking him with that arm coming out of the wall. He just cuts that off and goes and tries to kill Jimmy now. And then Jimmy disappears. He comes up behind him, and again, Patrick gets choked, and he tries to stab Bones. But when he pulls out the knife, a bunch of like souls come out, and this is where that whirlwind comes and like I gotta believe it's like sucking Patrick's soul out of his body, but you can't really tell. Like, he's just floating there, and there's like this tornado of souls going around him. Oh, while this is happening, we see Pearl, and she's looking at herself in the mirror now, and she sees her true self, this older version of herself wearing that dress, but now it has the blood, and she kind of realizes what's going on. She sees what's happening to Patrick over there. Cynthia's yelling her lungs off, telling her dad to stop. So then Pearl jumps into action. She grabs a candle. She yells Jimmy's name, and she's like, I love you. And then she sets herself on fire. I think that's so unnecessary for her to do. But she sets herself on fire. Jimmy goes over and he tries to put it out, but then he himself catches fire as well. And then everything just starts like tumbling down. The whole building starts to shake. Everything's going on. And Patrick realizes he has to get himself and Cynthia out of there before, they get trapped and die themselves.
Yeah, so they end up getting to the point where they are going to jump down kind of where that they had just climbed up, that weird elevator shaft looking area. And Patrick's like, we got to jump. And Cynthia's kind of like, no. And he's like, no, we got to jump, like on, 3 or whatever, or like now. And the camera cuts and you see Patrick falling, but then Cynthia it looks like she gets kind of sucked backwards. And we see Patrick hit the ground, and he's looking around like, Cynthia, and then Cynthia hits later, and they continue to make their way out of the crumbling building. They make their way out, and then it kind of looks now like it's morning time, and the building is all burnt up and crumbled, and we get where Patrick finds the picture, and it's the picture of the mom and of Pearl and Jimmy. And then the camera ends up looking at what's that girl's name, Cynthia, and Cynthia has these evil eyes on her, and I'm like, at least for me watching, I'm like, oh snap, they got her. But then, like, how did they get her? Because like Jimmy and the mom are supposed to burn up. I'm like, what the heck's going on? And then you could just sense that Patrick feels something, so he turns around, and as soon as he does, Cynthia just shoots maggots on Patrick, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, and before he looks back at Cynthia, he's looking at that picture, and it kind of references earlier when Pearl was looking at it and how Jimmy turned his face. Well, that's exactly what had happened to Patrick when he was looking at the picture. And then Cynthia's voice turns very demonic, and it says something, and it's like a joke that's been running throughout the whole film. But it says
dog eats dog.
There you go. Dog eats dog, and it refers to like something Jimmy had heard when he was dying, I believe. And yeah, so it says that, and then you see Cynthia's mouth filled with maggots, and then she like pukes it out at the camera, and then that's the film. It's a very interesting ending. I don't know. It didn't sit right with me as far as, you know, I don't even know how to describe my feelings towards it. It's just kind of there. It's not necessarily good. It's not necessarily bad. It's just kind of an okay ending.
I personally wasn't a fan of the ending just because, like, I actually had to look up a little bit afterwards and rewatch a part or two because I didn't understand how Cynthia became infected or demonic, you know? How did she have this happen to her? Because we like is she like did this did she get like possessed? Is she a shapeshifter now? Like I just don't know. And is it that when Jimmy and Pearl were dying, but we of course saw where Cynthia doesn't jump right away, she kind of gets sucked back. Did they bring her back and some like she get possessed by them? I don't know, and I feel like it's not very well explained. We just know that like she's not herself, and that this I guess the spirit of Jimmy lives through Cynthia now.
Yeah, I mean, from what understood, I knew that Patrick had jumped and Cynthia didn't go with him. And then he looks up through that elevator shaft and she's not there. She was standing at that entrance and now she's not there. And then she just kind of appears. So what I assume, because once they get out of that elevator shaft, like all these souls come like rushing out with the downfall of the building. So from my own perspective, I most likely wrong, but I believe that one of the souls, especially Bones himself, snuck into her, and she kind of had that hesitation to jump out. But because she had that hesitation, that one of those souls was able to, take over her body, and then she became evil, and now she's got, that spirit, that evil spirit inside of her, and she's now the Bones part, and I guess he just lives on through her. I don't know.
And you might be right with that, because I remember when Maurice died and when Patrick came and the wolf shot up all the maggots at him, it wasn't that he just shot up the maggots and then it cut to the maggots falling from the ceiling. The spirit actually came out of the wolf's mouth, made its way down to the cellar area, and then went into the skeleton of Bones. So that your theory might actually be right, in that when Bones was burning alive, the spirit went out so that way it wouldn't, I guess, perish, and then attached itself onto Cynthia.
See, yeah, okay, that does make a lot of sense then, because I did miss that part when the spirit left the dog, which would definitely make a lot of sense, because that dog just kind of disappears once Jimmy wakes up, yeah. So, yeah, that's probably what happened. I don't know if Cynthia is able to be that shapeshifter like the dog was, turning into the attractive woman, the rat, and so forth. But that's very interesting. That's okay. Now I definitely see that whole connection there, which makes it a little bit better for me.
So I did, before we give our ratings, I wanted to bring up, now that we've discussed the whole movie, so I believe that they added the part where he cut the pool table and the blood shot out, because essentially the whole reason why Bones is back alive, or he's back on Earth, is because of blood. He's attached to blood. And so and if you think about all his killings are very gory. They're all involve a lot of blood. So I feel like that's just something that's a part of his character. And so when he slices the pool table and the blood comes out, I just think that's just like him. Like, I'm trying to think of other horror characters and they're just not popping up in my head right now, but I feel like let's say if
like Candyman with the bees and kind of
exactly,
that?
yeah, like Candyman with the
Okay.
bees, like the bees are attached to him, so there's like scenes where there's just like a ton of bees and they're coming out of the mouths and in the mouths and stuff. So I feel like with this, it's like he's attached to blood. The way that they tried to kill him was to essentially remove the blood, get rid of the blood. So his existence is tied to it. So naturally, all his killings are going to be very gory, very bloody, and him, I guess, kind of doing his thing. That little scene just involved blood. That's the way I looked at it afterwards.
That would definitely make sense because it wasn't until the dog was like really eating and gaining all that blood and where we get Jimmy coming back to life. So I definitely see that as far as being needing all that blood and all that gore, just for him to be alive in order to get that revenge and so forth. Another thing I wanted to talk about was I did feel that Pearl lighting herself on fire was a bit unnecessary, but now that I'm thinking about it a little more, that's the only. Well, no, not necessarily, because she would have just burned the dress with Jimmy's blood on it. That would have been the end of Jimmy, right?
Technically, yes, but I feel like if you remember when he gives her the dress and she turns into her former self. I want to say Jimmy had mentioned like essentially we can be together forever kind of thing. Like we'll be together forever. Something along those lines. I would need to rewatch it. So I feel like in Cynthia's mind, if she takes off the dress and burn it, what's to say that Jimmy doesn't, because he's this evil spirit now, he's going to turn and just kill her. She probably knows that Jimmy loved her so much and he didn't have that same ill will towards her that he had against the other ones. So if she still is wearing the dress and she burns herself, naturally Jimmy, he loves her, he's going to run directly to her, so he's going to burn in the fire like with her kind of thing.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have happened. I guess now that I'm seeing it, it's maybe she just wanted to be with him forever. I mean, that was her love for so long, and she saw him, get murdered brutally, and she was involved with that as well. Being forced to stab him. Maybe she just wanted to forget everything and be with the love of her life forever, like he was explaining. I'm sure that's what it was coming to. Like if he had the chance to ask her to be with him forever, he would have to kill her, and their spirits would forever be together. So I think that's just what it came down to, is her making up that decision. Like, I want to be with this man forever, so I'm like, light both of us on fire, and we're just gonna leave my daughter, defend for herself.
Yeah. So with that in mind, how many pints of blood are you giving this movie?
Oh man, this is hard because there's a lot that I feel is wrong with this, but then again, I like a lot of it as well. So I'm probably gonna go just above the middle and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I feel like it was pretty good. I would definitely watch it again. Definitely recommend it to everybody. I thought the acting performances from everybody was pretty good. I mean, what else can I say? As far as the things I didn't like, it was the silliness of it. If they would have, made it more serious, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I mean, other than that, I didn't find too many things wrong with it. There was certain parts of that silliness that I did enjoy. That's why I didn't necessarily give it a 5, or 6. So I just enjoyed it. It's a good movie to just kind of pass the time if you're not looking for anything too serious as far as horror. That's really all I have to say about it. There's not too many bad things with it, not too many great things with it. It's just kind of a decent movie to put on every once in a while. What about you?
I have to agree with you. I was going to give it a 7 as well. This one was very, very difficult to kind of piece out because part of me wanted to go at 7 at first, and then I was like, well, there was a lot of the silliness that I could have done without, but so I was gonna go lower and give it a 6, but I realized that did the silliness really take away from it that much that I didn't enjoy the movie? And it didn't, you know. Yeah, I would have preferred it without the silliness. I would have done maybe a little bit of the killings a little different, but overall, I think they did really good. The thing that this movie exceeded with was the storytelling. They did a fantastic job the whole time of almost in every scene there was some little piece planted, and so it made you pay attention to each of those little every scene to make sure you pick up on all those points, so when it gets to the end you have a full understanding of everything. Also, I think, and I know you're a fan of killings in horror movies as well, I think you can appreciate that at the end of the day almost everyone died. So you know, it's not one of those kind of horror movies where everyone stays alive and everyone's handy dandy and they got rid of the big villain. You know, we're technically everyone died because we can assume that Cynthia killed or is more likely going to kill Patrick. All that's really left is Patrick's stepsister and stepmom, which I guess because as we kind of learn going forward, she stays out of their little business from the very beginning. She's there, then she's not really seen again. So you know, she's not really that important of a character compared to the rest of them. So yeah, I'll give him a 7.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. I feel as an early 2000s movie, it stands out. I don't necessarily agree with most of the negative reviews that I've read about this film. A lot of them had to touch on the music that was being played, which is a lot of R&B and rap. But I mean, there was a good amount of, you know, that horror tone of music as well, which it balanced it out for me. I didn't have a problem with any as far as the music. Of course, a lot of those people who wrote those negative reviews were white and didn't feel like Snoop Dogg gave a good performance. They had a lot of negative things to say about this being a majority black people movie. As far as the acting or the actor choices, excuse me. And yeah, it was a lot of negative things as far as, although it's not necessarily about the storytelling or, you know, different things like that, the things that we enjoyed about this and the things we looked for. So, if you focus only on those Rotten Tomato scores and, you know, audience reviews, it's very hard to find an unbiased one. And when I was looking at it, it was very hard to find an unbiased one.
Yep. I looked at a few, not necessarily like going in depth with them, but just some of the scores, and I was like, really? Some people gave it like a 28 and stuff out of 100. I'm like, come on, man. You're really going to sit here and tell me that like Death by Temptation and Abby are better than this? I mean, come on. This movie is really good. It honestly reminds me, while not the same, of course, especially not story-wise, it's similar to Tales from the Hood. Like, you know, you got actors that are acting as they would during that time frame of when the movie was filmed, how kind of stereotypically, but still how a lot of black people talk during that time, how they dress during that time, what they listen to during that time. So it's just, you know, if you thought about how it was in 2001, how people talked and dressed, basically just add that, throw in a little bit of personality in it and a horror storyline, and that's what you get with this film. And me and you, we did a good job of being, well, I mean, we're never biased anyway, but we focused on the actual elements that go into a horror movie opposed to all that other nonsense. So
yeah, for sure. I definitely don't agree as taking those things into account. Like, why review a horror or movie at all if you're just going to be completely biased like that because of somebody's, you know, ethnicity and so forth. What was I going to say? I completely lost my train of thought, but while you were talking, I was going to touch on something that you mentioned. But anyways, let's get into some fun facts here. So Snoop Dogg and Pam Grier, who play both Jimmy and Pearl, had actually done a lot of music videos together before this film, but they had never appeared in a film together. I know Pam was a part of, I believe it's Mars Attacks, if I saw that correctly, and it was another big film that she was a part of when it comes to horror. Did you catch that?
I did not know. When I was, for those listening, you get a little behind the scenes. Spectrum basically decided to bend me over and have some fun with me tonight. So I don't, we're currently recording this using my phone's cellular connection. I do not have Wi-Fi. So a lot of some of the research I would normally have on the actors when it comes to like previous movies they've been in and stuff, I'm all out for that. So Jose, you got to take the reins on these fun facts, my guy.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I looked it up right now. She was actually a part of Jackie Brown with Samuel Jackson. Yeah, so she was in a pretty decent amount of good stuff. Mars Attacks, I was correct with that one. But yeah, this was their first movie together. They've done music videos together. I had mentioned earlier that they supposed to be the same age in the film, but she's actually 22 years older than him. No, actually didn't mention that. I'm sorry about that. She's 22 years older than Snoop Dogg. But they look so similar in age in the film. I don't know if it had to do with, just great upkeep of herself or just great makeup, but it was very interesting to hear that.
Black don't crack, man. Aging like fine wine.
Yeah, for sure. What else here? So when referring to the movie here, in one of those older flashbacks, the bodyguard shotgun refers to Eddie Mack as Huggy Bear. Snoop actually plays a character called Huggy Bear in the Starsky and Hutch remake.
Huh. And the Starsky and Hutch, that's the one with Johnny Knoxville? Or not Johnny Knoxville. Who is it? Oh no, Johnny Knoxville was Dukes and Hazzards.
Starsky and Hutch. Is he in Dukes? He's in one of those, right? Starsky and Hutch. Isn't that the Ben Affleck one? I think that's the Starsky and Hutch one. The Ben Affleck one. And Owen Wilson, if I'm...
Yeah, you're right. I got to give that a watch then, because I support Ben Affleck for life. He's down with Bridge 9 hardcore, so...
Yeah, that's really, he is? I didn't know that.
No, it's a long story, but basically the company that makes those shirts for the hardcore label has like the connections with celebrities, so they send celebrities care packages of free shirts that they've made. And Ben Affleck's from Boston, so the shirt said Bridge 9 Boston, so he was just like, I'm wearing a Boston shirt. He had no idea it was a hardcore label, but in my mind, Ben Affleck is crowd killing at shows.
Dude, could you imagine that? Back to this movie. I just have... Oh, that's pretty much all I have here. The other one was the reference to the 9/11 incident and it coming in so low. And yeah, I thought that was very interesting when you compare it to it also being released right on the same day as 13 Ghosts. And I guess a lot of people just had a problem with Snoop Dogg being, the main focus, the main actor of this film. And of course, a lot of people had negative reviews and remarks because it was, racism, and they didn't give this rapper a good shot of showing his true acting ability. So I thought that was probably the most interesting fun fact that I could find.
Gotcha. Then if that's all you got for fun facts, before we get out of here, go ahead and talk about our affiliates.
Oh, yeah, of course. So we are very, very excited to announce that we are partnering with Alamo Draft House, Mondo Tees, I believe that's the full name there. No, sorry, it's just Mondo. And we are partnering with FYE for your entertainment. We're going to bring you a lot of links, and it's definitely an honor to be working with these companies because I have admired Alamo Drafthouse for sure for so many years. I love that movie theater. And we're going to provide a lot of links everywhere. And you can go shop for tickets for Alamo Drafthouse, gift cards. They sell those a lot. As far as Mondo, they carry a lot of movie-related merch. So you'll find T-shirts, you'll find movie posters, you'll find they carry a lot of vinyl. So we're very big on physical media. So they have a lot of soundtracks, a lot of different things like that. And it's not only movies, not only horror, it's TV, it's a lot of pop culture. And that really applies to FYE as well. They carry a lot of T-shirts, a lot of Funko Pops. I know that's very big when it comes to collectors. And yeah, I mean, just to be able to have the privilege to work with these companies and be able to say that we have a podcast that works so closely with them is a privilege, and I'm very grateful for it. And we are so excited to provide more info and more updates, stuff that you don't necessarily see within these companies. And we're going to go ahead and, keep you guys updated, and we're excited for it. I am speechless when it comes to it. It was very, very big shock when reading that email.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. I want to thank everybody for the support that they've given us. Of course, we wouldn't have been able to have these opportunities without you all following us on social media, writing reviews, telling us personally what you think of the podcast. We really appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate Jose for putting in the time and effort to reach out to these companies and, bring these opportunities to us as well. So very excited.
Yeah, man. I mean, I can't even express how appreciative I am of everybody listening, of everybody who's been supportive, whether they've listened or not. It gives me such a happy feeling, especially to be working with you, Deonte, to be able to put out this whole season of podcasts. I never thought I would do it. I've been wanting to do this for so many years, and just to be able to have this out here for everybody to listen to, even if something happens and it's only this one season, it was definitely a privilege, and I'm so grateful for it, to be working with such a great co-host, and talking to these people who are also passionate about movies, and being able to reach out to these companies and to other podcasts and getting many different feedbacks. And I just want to put out my passions and to actually be able to live a fulfilling life, and this is definitely something that has helped for sure.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I feel the exact same way. This podcast as well, I've done a few minor kind of things that didn't really go far. In the past, I had done a little bit of a wrestling type of podcast, and did a couple episodes of that and had fun, but it didn't have the type of consistency and I would say the production value that we're doing here. So I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to do it. I'm super excited for season 2. We got, as the kids say, we got some bangers for season 2. Very excited. And hopefully, and in between season 2, I know after we drop the last episode, we are gonna kind of drop an episode just detailing of what's going to be in between, and what those episodes are going to be about. I think they're going to be maybe a little bit more fun, a little more digestible, as I'm sure they'll be a little bit shorter since we're not doing an actual movie review. And we hope that you all can kind of relate to what we're talking about when we do those. So.
Yeah, for sure. And if you are listening right now and you got into this point in this lengthy podcast, but we want to discuss things with you. I'm very open to having guest hosts during this off period and just kind of discussing movies with random, people that have listened, or if you have any requests about something we should talk about, if it's your favorite directors or your favorite movie, not necessarily reviewing that movie, but, different things like that. If you want us to discuss, the history of horror, things like that, reach out to us. We're more than willing to give anything a shot, especially during this off period, because we don't have a set, script to follow or anything like that. So I love talking about horror. I love talking about film in general. Always reach out to us. I'm going to plug in the socials right here before we get out of here. I'm on Instagram at j.gallegos, that spell that j.a.g.allegos, and on Twitter it's Spirited Jose. Talk to us. I'm very, very open to many conversations, whether it's about film or not. If you need someone to reach out to, I'm here, and I'm sure Deonte is as well.
Yeah, of course. You can always reach out to me. My DMs are always open. We could talk about horror. You have ideas for the podcast, anything you think we could improve on, positive criticism, negative criticism. We want to hear it all. So you can find me on Twitter at _under_the_knife, and on Instagram at xdeontems. I'm not sure. I'll just go ahead and say it again just in case. For the podcast handles on Instagram at Gruesome Task Podcast on Instagram, and on Twitter at the Gruesome Task. Any final words?
I really don't have any. I'm very excited for Get Out next week. That's something that I did want to plug in and I forgot about. But we are doing Get Out for our final episode, and I'm so excited for it. This was the #1 movie on our list for this season, and yeah, we're ready for it. We hope you guys are as well. Let's build some hype for it. I'm very excited for it.
Yep, Get Out. Come back next week for that. It's going to be very exciting. Before we sign off here, I just want to say, arrest the cops that killed my boy Daniel Prude, and arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor. Thank you all for listening.
Life sucks, and then you die.